Hello and welcome to Insights. I am Elizabeth Omori. An electoral system determines how elections are conducted and how results are interpreted. The system governs all aspects of the voting process. For example, when elections occur, who is allowed to vote, who can stand as a candidate, how ballots are marked and cast, how the ballots are counted, and other factors that can affect the results. In Nigeria, the 2023 general elections were conducted within the framework of the Electoral Act 2022. Today, we will review the EU Election Observation Mission's report on the 2023 general elections, which has been generating a lot of buzz. Now, because of the close connection between humans and animals, it is important to be aware of the common ways people can get infected with germs that can cause zoonotic diseases. Mitigating the impact of emerging zoonotic diseases is also on our lineup. So, let's begin.
I'm fascinated with the discourse on national monuments and assets and how much is being done to preserve and
look into the language issue. We have turned English to become like a pride value in our own cultural values.
National cash transfer is not a COVID-19.
Invasion 1897 was a deliberate calculation.
You know, many of these people coming to the urban areas now.
These and applications, there are terms and conditions that
of course it is the union of two people, a man and a woman coming together.
My name is Nnamdi Odipo.
And I'm Elizabeth Omori.
Their educational deprivation is not the end of the road.
Agencies and stakeholders to proactively tackle these challenges.
Women in most countries of the world constitute about 50% of registered voters.
Kevin Williams reporting for Dateline 360.
In Jos, Caleb Gochin, Dateline 360.
Dateline 360. Shidi Okrafo.
For Dateline 360.
In Lagos, Michael Olaleye.
Reporting for Dateline 360.
I am Omosola Omojola. Thanks for tuning in.
A zoonotic disease is an infection that is transmissible from vertebrate animals to humans. According to Physiopedia, nearly 2/3 of human infectious diseases arise from pathogens shared with wild or domestic animals. Endemic and exotic zoonosis cause about 1 billion illnesses in people and millions of deaths every year, threatening global health. For a country like Nigeria with over 200 million population, what are the response mechanisms to halt the spread of these diseases? My guest is the Chief Veterinary Officer of Nigeria, Dr. Kulumba Vakro. Dr. Kulumba, thank you so much for joining us on Insight.
Thank you for having me on the program, and good morning, listeners.
Let's begin with an assessment of a disease surveillance. Why are we having emerging infectious diseases recurring?
Yeah, there are many factors for reoccurrence of diseases, especially the major ones. Since we're narrowing down to zoonotic diseases, diseases that are transmissible between humans and animals and vice versa. One of the factors is weak surveillance system, lack of proper awareness on the occurrence of these diseases. And also we have the challenge of having diseases spilling over from animals, because if the veterinary services are unable to hold it to the animal population, it spills over to animals. And we also have the challenge of climate change. The climate is changing, and so also the animal population will have to survive, and they are looking for survival elsewhere, coming very close to animal population. The farming system is also another problem for us because when you clear the habitats of the animals, they will find a place to live. And in the process, there will be exchange of pathogens between humans and animals. Recently, we also have the problem of antimicrobial resistance, which means the drugs that we've been using are no longer effective against these microbes for other reasons. And so you have the pathogens developing resistance to the conventional drugs. Additionally, some of the attitudes to the environment also contributes to the outbreaks of infectious diseases. For instance, if the environment is not well taken care of, we're dumping a lot of things into the environment. Some of the pathogens are there in the environment, and some of them could come close to each other and exchange genetic material, and you have a new pathogen emerging that would be even more dangerous than the both parents.
Okay. All right. So why are zoonotic diseases very difficult to control?
Yeah, they are difficult to control. It depends on your approach. When you approach, if the approach to the control mechanism is professionally oriented and you have harmonized effort of professionals working together and having the same objective, you are likely to register some good measures of success. If, on the other hand, as a nation, you don't have a good team that are very vibrant and focused, then you are likely to have a situation whereby people are doing things differently and the focus is not on the origin of the disease or the source of the disease. So you will continue to have some challenges in the control of such diseases.
What is Nigeria's response mechanism to these diseases?
Well, so far our response, we could classify it as being good. For instance, we had Ebola some few years ago. People predicted that it will be a very difficult situation for us to contain and control. But we succeeded as a nation in eradicating the disease. So that was a plus for us. Most recently, we also have the issue of COVID-19. The prediction elsewhere was that we would have some challenges in controlling the disease, but it happened otherwise. So we're able to succeed in that. So generally, our response to disease event in the country could be termed as being good.
As an expert, what is the first line of defense against zoonosis for humans?
The first line of defense is your level of preparedness. Your surveillance system should be vibrant and sensitive. Surveillance is actually intelligence gathering about disease situations in a given location or at a population level. And what that entails is that if your surveillance system is sensitive enough to pick the disease, you could mobilize resources, localize the disease, and get it eradicated before it gets to other parts of the country. So the most critical thing to have in place is to have a vibrant and sensitive surveillance system. The second thing is that you should have a team that is balanced. And what I mean by balanced team is that a lot of stakeholders are involved in disease control. And so your ability to bring this team together, train them when you are awaiting outbreak of a major zoonotic disease, will tell very much on your capability to control the disease if it occurs. So the other most critical thing is deployment of resources. Now here, disease will not wait for you for the process of deployment of resources. If your process is cumbersome, a lot of bureaucracy involved, the disease will not wait. Yeah. So what I mean by that is that when you have your preparedness plan in place, you have a balanced team trained on standby, and then you should also have enough resources, both human and material resources, to be deployed simultaneously so that you'll be able to be on the top of the outbreak situation. But in the event that you could have a team in place, you could also have a trained team, the skills could be there. But when the resources for the team are not made available timely and promptly, then you would have issues in the control of the disease.
Dr. Vakri, you know, we've always had advisories on heights and some meat from some animals.
Yeah.
I mean, the skin of animals, but more in our local parlance. And, you know, during the outbreak of Ebola and Lassa fever, we were actually warned to stop eating bushmeat. But looks like we are not taking these warnings into consideration.
Your ability to articulate your risk communication very well and test your message before the message goes out to the public will matter very much. More so, you should always have it in mind that when it comes to issue of or habits of eating, first of all, you will encounter some cultural issues. There could also be attitudinal issues. So persuasively, the message wants to go out in such a way that people will not misinterpret it. They should be able to see reason why you're communicating that risk. And some of the communications, the restriction of consumption is not for a long period. It's just to tell the public that given what we have at hand, the risk of incursion by an infectious disease, let's tie it down to zoonotic disease, is medium to high for our country, and there could be various reasons for that. So it is precautional in nature that we take some measures to protect our populace and protect also the human, the animal species and the environment. So it is precautional. It's not meant to really punish people or to deny them or their right to eat what you could afford. But it's just for us to take precaution as a nation that, look, given what we have at hand, given the behavior of the disease or the disease pathogen, we consider this and that as a major risk factor. To mitigate this factor, we now advise people to desist from certain habits and some consumption of certain foods, but it's for a moment. It is not going to be forever.
Of course. All right, when we talk about the classification of zoonotic diseases, coronavirus is actually part of the group. Are the symptoms similar?
First of all, is the immune system of the victim. What I mean by that is that naturally we have some defense mechanism. It's inbuilt within us, it's also in the animals. So if yours is weak, you are likely to come down with more severe signs of the disease. Those of us, some people are lucky somehow, their immune system is strong. So the expression of the disease in such people will also be very mild, and so it varies. It also varies with the pathogen. Some of them are very virulent, others are very mild. So if, for instance, you had taken immunization against a given disease, if you are infected or exposed to that disease pathogen, the way it will express itself in you will be mild because you have some level of protection. But if, on the other hand, you have not been exposed previously and you have not been immunized or vaccinated, as we will use in the veterinary terms, exposure to such pathogens could have a very severe expression.
Severe
manifestation.
Okay. Recently, there was a flag on anthrax, and we have domestic animals around us. What are the ways to minimize the risk of contracting a zoonotic disease from pets?
The first thing to do is you listen to experts. Once the risk communication messages are packaged in such a way that it reaches out to the public on time again, I'm emphasizing that if you don't communicate the risk on time, others will do it on your behalf in the way they understand. And so instead of you focusing on management of the crisis or the mitigation of the incursion of the disease, you will spend so much time on damage management. What I mean by that is that wrong information has gone out there. So to recall it is very difficult. It's not like something you have on the table that you could just say, okay, give me this back. There's something wrong with it. No. You may never get to know everybody that had that information. So you package the information on risk based on a risk assessment, then you do the risk communication quickly so that people are aware of the possible incursion by the disease. And if it is the disease, a disease that is already with you, they're also aware of the possible implication of it. Every person that is involved in public health would understand the need for that. You should do it in such a way that people know what they should do, what they shouldn't do, and what the government is doing. What the government is doing, it creates confidence in the populace that somebody somewhere, an expert somewhere, is aware of this and certain measures are being taken. So it creates that confidence in the populace. And it will now facilitate the flow of information between the expert and the system that is in place for the control of such diseases. So these are some of the measures that should be taken critical from the onset.
There's an outbreak of anthrax in the northern region of Ghana. Aside this advisory, are there other warnings or measures the federal government have taken to ensure that this does not come into Nigeria? Our borders are there.
Yeah, fine. So there are usually when you get risk alert on the outbreak of major diseases, most especially in the neighboring country or a country that you have very close links with, when it comes to the issue of Ghana, the movement of people, animals, and animal products between these two countries is high. So in the process of this movement, there are chances that undesirable pathogens could also be taken along. It could be through human movement, it could be through animal or animal products movement. Now, let me narrow down on anthrax. Anthrax is a bacterial disease, but it is a very hardened pathogen. Why is it so? It's a pathogen that once there is an advanced condition, unfavorable condition to it, it forms spore. It forms a kind of cocoon and that surrounds it, and it can persist in the environment or contaminated animal products for decades. There are reports that it has survived in contaminated animal product or environment for 40 years, 60 years. And there are also literature that indicates that, even for 100 years. So that means the pathogen has that ability to persist in the environment, awaiting a favorable condition for it to express itself. Now, usually that comes through inhalation of the spores or contamination of food with the spore. It could also be contamination of water sources. So when it comes to the issue of animal products, we are being careful in such a way that in as much as we don't discourage people from consumption, but it is precautional that you take certain measures. You never can tell where the bushmeat, for example, is originating from. It could be a kind of delicacy to some people, but you need to be alive to enjoy the delicacy.
Of course.
If you eat something that will cause a lot of problem for you and mount unreversible pressure on your family or relations, then your best bet is to do without that pleasure for a moment. So that is why we communicated that. So as a nation, when we received that risk communication from the Regional Animal Health Center in Bamako, we notified the authority of the Federal Minister of Agriculture and all the key stakeholders that are involved in disease containment. And of course, through with the permission of the Permanent Secretary, he actually initiated that event and said, okay, let's articulate message out to go out there on that. And then he had a press briefing outlining some measures that we could take as precautionary measures to, first of all, mitigate against the risk of introduction. And if somehow it gets introduced into the country, some measures also to make sure that we are able to localize it and control it and get it eradicated.
Let's talk about vaccination.
Yeah.
It is another method to stop the spread of zoonotic diseases.
Yeah.
How effective is our storage system for the vaccines?
Well, on our part, luckily for us, for anthrax, for example, our National Veterinary Research Institute in VOM produces the vaccine, animal vaccine against anthrax. There is also human vaccine against anthrax, but for us, let me narrow down on animal. So the institute at VOM produces most of the animal vaccines. The potency of the vaccine matters much, and how you are able to maintain the cold chain from the production to the point of administration. So there could be some challenges along the line, but at least from the veterinary perspective, we are able to mitigate such challenges. So the vaccine against anthrax particularly is being produced at MVRI, and it is available for use.
Okay. We also understand that there is no vaccination against avian influenza, which has to do with poultry in Nigeria. What is the nation doing to solve this problem?
Well, there has been pressures from different groups for us to go into vaccination. Other nations are vaccinating, but as a nation, what we said was that there are some basic things we need to put in place. First of all, the vaccine protects against specific strains. What I mean by that is that different types of the virus. So vaccine is really specific for a given virus. So the first thing to do is to know what is circulating in your environment. So what that means is that through your surveillance, you update the circulating strains. And once that is done, you are now more informed on the challenges you have out there in the field, and that determines the type of vaccine you would like to bring into the country or to open your market for. The second thing to do is to match the vaccine with the circulating strains you have and see whether this vaccine you want to use would protect your flock when it comes to poultry species, for instance. And then vaccine alone would not perform the miracle.
Okay.
It has to be vaccine in combination with implementation of basic hygienic measures, and usually we term them as biosecurity measures. These are measures that the farmer wants to take and take it seriously to protect the incursion of disease pathogen into his or her flock. So if you had the combination of these two in place, it would work. However, as a nation, when we had the first outbreak of avian influenza, we also had vaccine as an option for the control, but we opted for full implementation of basic hygienic measures across the country. We also deployed resources simultaneously, and through the help of our partners, so we had this concerted effort that were coordinated from the center, and so we are doing the same thing across the states, and our surveillance system was very vibrant. So we were able to control and got the disease eradicated without the use of vaccine. So we are now ruling out the use of vaccine as such, but the point we are making is that we should be scientific oriented in the approach for vaccination against HPI. So consultatively, we had met with stakeholders in the poultry industry, and we had agreed that before we go into vaccination, those basic things would have to be implemented. And if after the implementation of those basic biosecurity measures, adequate funding of our surveillance system, getting the strains in circulation identified, if after that we still have challenges of the disease, then we could go into vaccination against it in phases. In phases because our production system is peculiar. Whatever measure, intervention measure or disease prevention measure that you would have to take, you would have to look at it critically to make it holistic in such a way that none of the production system is left behind. And all the measures that you are going to implement will also work for all the production systems. So that is one of the disadvantages of us rushing into vaccination without some basic things in place. Additionally, the poultry industry in Nigeria is, with all its potential, and I should be quick to mention here that of all the sectors in agriculture, the poultry industry has its shoulder above others when it comes to potentials of creating employment, potentials of improving the economy, and even diversifying the economy, shifting from oil into agriculture, which should be our dream as a nation.
Our focus.
By now.
Right.
Fine. So if we are able to do these basic things, we could go into vaccination in stages. First of all, open it up for the commercial poultry owners to protect their investment. And then you now watch out through constant monitoring and evaluation, adjusting the system to such a point that by the time we now come into to consider vaccination in the backyard poultry, you would have had a good understanding of what you are doing. But not for us to jump into confusion as being done in some countries, and they are still battling with the disease anyway.
All right, Dr. Vakura, I want to thank you so much for the enlightenment. Now we know what to do, and now we know what the federal government is doing. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you for educating us. Thank you very much.
I'm fascinated with the discourse on national monuments and assets and how much is being done to preserve and
look into the language issue. We have turned English to become like a pride value in our own cultural values.
It's not cash transfer. It's not a COVID-19.
Invasion 1897 was a deliberate
You know, many of these people coming to the urban areas now.
These and applications, there are terms and conditions that
of course it is the union of two people, a man and a woman coming together.
My name is Nnamdi Odipo.
And I'm Elizabeth Omori.
Educational deprivation is not the end of the road.
Agencies and stakeholders to proactively tackle these challenges.
Women in most countries of the world constitute about 50% of registered voters.
Henry Williams, reporting for Dateline 360.
In Jos, Caleb Gochin, Dateline 360.
Dateline 360. Shidi Okrafo.
For Dateline 360.
In Lagos, Michael Olaleye.
Reporting for Dateline 360.
I am Omosola Omojola. Thanks for tuning in.
Election observation by the United Nations is a valuable tool for improving the quality of elections. Observers help build public confidence in electoral processes. Observation can help promote and protect the civil and political rights of participants in elections. When observers issue positive results, they build trust in the democratic process and enhance the legitimacy of the governments that emerge from elections. And on this segment, we will examine the EU Election Observation Mission's report for the 2023 general elections in Nigeria. And the chairman, Inter-Party Advisory Council, Yabagi Sani, will review the report. Sir, thank you so much for joining us on Insights.
Thank you very much for having me, Lizzie.
Thank you so much.
Thank
now
you,
let's
viewers.
begin with your assessment of the 2023 general elections. Let's set the conversation from there.
Well, you know, as a Nigerian and also a participant, a key player in the elections, I believe that democracy is a journey, and also election is like a wedding. You know, the marriage is when the government is formed, and then you now see the character and the benefits, you know, of that, you know, wedding that you had during the election. So to us, we believe that when you look at the umpire, meaning INEC, because we have to take it from the preparatory, you know, the process itself, when the process, you know, started. Really, there was a lot of innovations, you know, brought in. INEC invested a lot of time because immediately after 2019 election, INEC got to work and then started the process of the 2023 elections. So the preparation was very meticulous. We had introduction of advanced, you know, technologies like beavers, RF, and things like that. But when it came to the issue of the actual election itself, definitely Nigeria, like you know, we have a lot of underlying, you know, issues. There are a lot of dichotomies, like when you take it from the primaries, you know, you have to look at, you know, the primaries conducted by the political parties. There were issues, you know, when the primaries were conducted around issues, the dichotomies I talked about, religion, region, and ethnicity. So, well, candidates came up and election was conducted. The issues of infractions, you know, came in, and then I think to a very large extent were able to contain some of those infractions. Okay. But quite a number, INEC, you know, does not have the capacity, neither the political parties themselves, that can contain some of the infractions that, you know, took place during the elections, which led to you know, some observers, you know, making some conclusions, which to us was rather, you know, it was rather intellectual, because when you weigh the actual, you know, events that took place during the election against the background from where we are coming from, you will find that some of those things that happened, there was no other way, because the fundamentals were not such that we'll be able to, you know, stop those things from happening.
The European Union Election Observation Mission's report has raised several issues or concerns. As an actor in our electoral process, what do you deduce from this?
Okay, you know, aside from EU, like you rightly said, we also had AU, that's African Union. Mm-hmm. You have the ECOWAS, you have the local CSOs, I'm thinking civil society organizations, and other independent observers were accredited by INEC. So, but EU, you know, EU since 2008, there was an understanding or an agreement really signed between Nigeria and EU, to see how they can assist Nigeria, not only for political reasons, but also for economic reasons, for social reasons, how we can be able to deepen, democracy, how they can help by way of financial capacity building and things like that. So, and I think it's been going on, and then Nigeria has been, of course, benefiting from such assistance. It was for the two parties, I mean, EU and Nigeria, to benefit from it because they recognize the fact that Nigeria is the most populous nation on the continent of Africa and the largest economy on the continent of Africa. And remember that the ambassador to EU in Nigeria also covers the ECOWAS region. So, so whatever happens in Nigeria definitely will have ripple effects on what happens in the ECOWAS region. So they made Nigeria to be the hub of the activities. That's why when elections are taking place in Nigeria, they always take particular interest in seeing that we get it right. I remember when about 3 months or so, to the election, the EOAM, that's the European Observation Mission, came to my office, that's IPAC office. We had a lot of discussions with them around, the security issues, use of money, violence, and things like that. And so after the election, and like they deployed their own personnel, not only EU really. I think Sweden was also part of the delegation, and some other other countries also were there. So it was the total, I mean the final report of EU, where they identified on 3 areas that they believe that Nigeria should take a look at, to see how we can improve on the processes themselves. And then to us, we believe that yes, having been partners, with Nigeria, for a long time on election matters, not only election matters, but also issue of governance, issue of trade and investments, and other issues like social issues. So we believe they mean well, but you see, where we believe that EU may not be correct is the fact that we, the participants, especially IPAC and the political parties themselves that participated, we are the one wearing the shoes. We know where it pinches. We know the underlying conditions. We know why certain things happened the way they happened. We know that the fundamentals are not yet there as they should be. If you look at the electoral framework itself, that's Electoral Act 2022, there are a lot of things that were not in place. That is not the fault of INEC. Perhaps National Assembly, for one reason or the other, was ambiguous on some of the laws. If you look at issues, for instance, of collation, yes, beavers worked wonderfully well, but when it comes to the issue of collation, it's still a manual process. So these are the things that were responsible for some of the sharp practices that the INEC officials were able to capitalize on. Because so the EU report, as detailed as it is, still I think Nigerians will have to wait for the report from IPAC, because we are already embarking on our own, study of what happened. And we will very soon come up with the findings, which I believe will tell Nigerians exactly what happened and the way forward.
The polls. Okay, if we take a look at that report, the first statement says the 2023 general elections did not ensure a well-run, transparent and inclusive democratic process, as assured by the Independent National Electoral Commission, INEC. As an actor, do you agree with that statement?
Issue of transparency and accountability that we are looking for in the election can only take place if we truly make INEC to be independent. Transparency that EU was talking about that is absent perhaps when you look at what happened during the transmission of results, from the IRF, the law was very ambiguous, on what should happen, during the elections, as regard the transmission of results, because it wasn't stated, clearly that INEC must, transmit results, and INEC came out with their own guidelines, although. And I was saying, even at that time, that INEC has been too ambitious, really, that they are going to transmit the result immediately, after the votes were cast. So I believe that it will be a challenge because, transparency that was not there, I think, is as a result of the environment under which INEC was operating. And it's also under the environment and the legal framework that was put in place for INEC to operate. It was not very clear. It didn't come out clearly to say this is what INEC should do. INEC on their own came up with their own guidelines, and then that's what I think made people to say, okay, you say you're going to do this, you didn't do it. So perhaps that's the transparency they're talking about, that it wasn't transmitted online, for everybody to see what was happening. The issue is that INEC promises that they're going to tell us exactly what happened, why that happened. Such sensitive assignments, such critical areas of INEC, of the process, should be outsourced, I think. And when we outsource it,
public-private partnership.
Yes, exactly, public-private partnership. Then we will be able to, eliminate some of these, unnecessary problems that we encounter. So yes, later arrival of the, and then some cases, it may be deliberate. Some it could be the fact that maybe they enter into agreement with the transport companies. They may refuse to show up, or they show up, the one thing or the other happen. So this is why that area of logistics can be given to a company, that can handle it, effectively. And then you will see changes that will happen.
Interesting. Okay, now, when you read that report carefully, 92 or 93 pages, INEC was not spared in the report. Are there lessons the electoral umpire can pick from this report for future elections?
No, it's really, you see, it affects the confidence of Nigerians in INEC. INEC has to look at some of these infractions, what happened, and that's why I say we are coming up with our own report that I believe will address some of these issues adequately, and then will provide way forward so that we will not have some of these hiccups that we have, which has made probably Nigerians to be more lukewarm now, to become more lukewarm, and we are trying to find a way by which Nigerians will be mobilized, more than before, to participate in the process, because participation is key, So it behoves on all of us, INEC, political parties, and in fact the citizens themselves, to ensure that we find a way by which we can minimize some of these things that are happening. You can look at it from the point of view of the issue of logistics, the issue of appointment of the INEC staff themselves, and the issue of the law, the electoral law itself. It should be very clear. There shouldn't be any ambiguities as to what you want to do. If you say that, okay, I cast my vote, and then casting the vote is one thing. Really, there's a saying that it is not those who cast the vote that determine who wins, but it's those who count the vote. So if you now allow somebody else to now count the vote, and in the process, they have to carry it from one place to the other, it's all done manual, then what we have, really, is very likely to happen. So these are the areas that we can really address in order to show up the confidence of the people, in INEC.
And in the electoral process.
In the electoral process, exactly.
Okay, the presidency also frowned at the report. States that EU's deployment of 40 observers to cover more than 176,000 polling units is inadequate. What does this portend for us for elections in Nigeria? Because we'll always have observers coming to do their jobs. Yeah,
the observers, like you rightly say from the beginning, they are to add credibility, to what you have done. Because if you have somebody who is an independent person coming to look at the process, and then his judgment is very likely to be very apt. I mean, not tainted by any bias. So that's why the issue of observers is not only Nigeria. Other countries, you have people going to observe their election processes and things like that. But the issue here is that the EU, definitely a lot of it is intellectual, because they were looking at our situation, perhaps comparing it with their own situation, which is different. Here we are battling with so many things. EU in their countries, I'm not sure they have these kind of problems. But even at that, take for instance the United States of America, they are still the issue on Trump. Claiming that his mandate was stolen. It's a journey. We're going to take a look at what we have done so far, and we will take it from there and then improve on the process, because it's like every other human process. You always have ways by which you have to make improvement. So, and we're going to improve on it. It doesn't mean that we're going to throw away the baby with the bathwater. So we note the observation of EU reports. We note also the observation of the federal government. But we, the political parties, the critical stakeholders, we are going to come out with our own, report, which will address all the other issues that people may not even be aware of now. And government is right to react the way they did, because when you look at the environment, look at the timing of the EU report, that also, makes one to begin to wonder that isn't there anything, up the sleeves of these people, because the judiciary is on this process, they haven't finished, and then for you to come out with this kind of report, it doesn't sound, well. I mean, it doesn't sound proper. But then EU will tell you that they are independent. They are not.
And of course they are.
Yeah, but again, you have to respect the sensibilities, and then since they are here to deepen democracy, they are here to ensure that we have good governance. They are here to ensure that elections are done properly. To the extent that they spend their money to help to interact. I mean, with parties like ourselves and civil society organizations. I think they also have a responsibility to ensure that the process, especially they shouldn't be prejudiced. Prejudice the process that is on. I'm talking about the tribunal.
Yes.
Since people that did not accept the results in the INEC released are already before the court, and the agency or an institution like, or rather, an important body like EU should be a bit more careful, in given the time we are in, so that the judiciary would not feel pressurized or prejudiced, that why should that it may affect their judgment. So that's what we're trying to say. That's the only thing that the timing is what we think is not right. Otherwise, what they said, or perhaps we even have, more, critical view than the EU itself, because we are the victims. If you are talking about people that suffered, whatever the infractions, where we parties are the ones. But because we want to grow this democracy, because the democracy is important to us, because we believe Rome was not built, in a day, and nations, you must be allowed to make our mistakes and correct them. That's how we become strong. We can't just one election is not enough to determine or judge, the effectiveness of a process. No, it's an opportunity for us to now improve on that process. It's an opportunity for us to now tell ourselves the bitter truth. I mean, that yes, you are wrong what you did here, but now it's an opportunity to do it right.
To do it right.
Yes.
Okay, my final question is this. In that report, 6 priority recommendations were raised.
Yeah.
Now, can they be adopted by politicians, INEC, Nigerians, and the government?
They talk about issue of transparency. They talk about the issue of gender, balancing, people living with disabilities. Talk about access to polling units and then the privacy that is required. They talk about issue of violence and things like that. So I think these are things that we are very familiar with. We are dealing with them. And then, but again, it's okay for EU to now say, well, we are also looking at this and we recommend that something be done to improve on the process itself. Nobody, I'm not sure, the only thing they said is that it has affected the confidence of the people in INEC, But then, it's a learning curve, and I'm sure we will get it right, with time, really, as a nation, because one election is not enough to just throw away the baby with the bathwater. Yes, to conclude on the efficacy of the system. So I'm sure future elections, for instance, like the off-season elections coming in Kogi, Bayelsa, and Imo, INEC has learned a lot, from what has happened.
Yes.
And now that INEC is also stepping forward to discipline their own, because this is the first time INEC is taking their own, to court, with 6 charges, charges. So I believe INEC itself is also has learned a lot and is should be a better organization. And I'm sure these elections, the 3 off-season elections, will be another litmus test that Nigerians will use to now, build confidence. And I know INEC wants to build confidence of Nigerians in the process. All right,
Yabagi Sani, National Chairman, Inter-Party Advisory Council, we want to thank you so much for coming on Insight. Thank you for your thoughts.
Thank you very much, Lizzie.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you.
I'm fascinated with the discourse on national monuments and assets and how much is being done to preserve and
look into the language issue. We have turned English to become like a pride value in our own cultural values.
It's not cash transfer. It's not a COVID-19.
Invasion 1897 was a deliberate
many of these people coming to the urban areas now.
These and applications, there are terms and conditions that
of course it is the union of 2 people, a man and a woman coming together.
My name is Nnamdi Odipo.
And I'm Elizabeth Omori. And that's Insight today. Thank you so much for watching. I'm Elizabeth Omori. Remain safe and patriotic always. See you next week.